All right. Hey, Don, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Angela, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so Don, please tell us. We always have a quick discussion before we jump on the podcast, and I'm really excited for all the work that you're doing at Just Capital and the impact and the work you're doing for the world. So, would love to hear more about you, who you are, what you do, and that impact that you're looking to make on the world. What is it?
Yeah, awesome. So, yeah, I'm the founder of Just Capital Quotient. Just Capital is uh, another entity. We are Just Capital Quotient, and my work comes out of 30 years of working in international relief and development, and coming to understand that really the economy is something that has to be changed if the world is going to be changed. That
Mm.
charity, the best of charity, still lives off of the real economy. It's kind of it lives off the economy as a host, and the host itself needs to be transformed. And that's where the spirit of charity, uh, the desire to serve others and to lift up communities, the social imperative that comes from charity, really needs to infect the overall economy. Um, and so that's where my passion lies, and that's what we do at Just Capital Quotient: is invest in businesses that are making a difference, and then help U.S. businesses that want to make an impact make a better one. So, what kind of impact do I want to make? I want to see a new economy emerge. I want to see an economy
Hmm.
that is life-giving for people and planet, that gives back more to people and planet than it takes. I want to see us leave a legacy of a new economy that is regenerative and life giving. That's the impact I seek.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And I would love to hear more about what that vision looks like for you. But for those who are not, I guess, in the space of, finance or business or, are keeping up with the economy, what would you say the current state is today? And why do you think it is so taking versus giving?
Hmm. I mean, I think the nature of capitalism itself has been structured, especially since the 1970s, the kind of shareholder capitalism, the Milton Friedman school, that the only obligation of business is to make a profit for the
Hmm.
shareholder. uh, the whole life of capitalism has had its rapacious side, but since the 70s, that has become, and with the end of communism as even as a theoretical alternative,
Hmm.
we have a type of ascendant capitalism that is dehumanizing, it is extractive, it is colonial, and there's no way around it as being a death dealing force in the world. So it is either healed, it is either transformed, um, or we pay the consequences as we are, and
Hmm.
as our children will even more so. So I think it is the common telos, the end point of all humans today, is to see our political social arrangements change in such a way that they can be life giving.
And are there any examples of economies that are closer to your vision today? I mean, help paint a picture for us as to what this future state or this change could look like.
Yeah, Charles Eisenstein, who does a lot of writing and research on this topic, talks about gift economies. And having traveled, and I just came back from Honduras, and we were up in
Hmm.
the mountains of Honduras, looking at agricultural communities where gift economies once existed and have broken down. Um, but here I'm currently at my dad's farm in southern Ohio, and local small farming communities were once much more based on gift as opposed to commodification. So I think there are memories of it all over the place, both in indigenous contexts, but even in more simple rural contexts. What more excites me, because we really can't completely go back, are the examples on the horizon now of regenerative approaches
Hmm.
to economics. So just yesterday, we entertained a pitch from a company in the Midwest called Tree Range Farms, which is a bringing indigenous practices of land management into chicken farming. And it's very
Mm.
much capitalist, trying to make money, but it's also highly attuned to ancient ways of seeing the energy in land and in the life-giving forces in land and what that land can give, in this case to chickens, who then give us life. So what really excites me is a more emergent future in which the best of capitalism, the best of science, begins to reappreciate what has been lost in ancient wisdom
Mm.
traditions, and begins to help us imagine a new way of our conducting our social arrangements.
Yeah, and what I love about this is, to your point, I think it's getting back to basics in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
getting back to the human condition, the
Mm-hmm.
best parts of it,
Mm-hmm.
and also this breakdown of power,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
where partnership is more prevalent. And I talk a lot about that from a workplace perspective, right? Where we
Mm-hmm.
see the employer employee relationship changing, just like some of the relationships you're talking about between land and food and people, and how that becomes more regenerative,
Mm-hmm.
where we are trying to give and to get together in a
Right.
partnership versus somebody is overseeing or overpowering to get something or to take something. And so that's
Yeah.
a huge shift in philosophy for this country.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, I think power and how it's used, how it's abused, how it's misunderstood, that is central to this conversation. Absolutely.
So tell us more about just capital quotient. And I apologize for
No
missing the
worries.
quotient there in the beginning, but you are doing some great work around this with your company. And I'm sure that's impacting and creating a ripple effect within other businesses. But tell us more about what you're doing and how it's contributing to this new vision.
Yeah. Well, we have two arms. We have an investment vehicle, and so for your listeners, if you have a business that's up and coming that needs capital, we don't have loads of it lying around to hand out like chiclets, but what we do have, we like to look together at what opportunities are there. And we are a club, so it's a very interesting model, and people are getting a lot of life out of just the community gathering around, taking seriously our part in the new economy. And we've invested in a business called the Halo app, which is seeking to take on the payday lending industry and to provide access to people who fall prey to predatory lending, a different mode of peer-to-peer lending. That's an awesome business. Quantum mental health, providing psychedelic assisted mental health therapy to the underinsured. That's amazing. It's a Denver-based company. And then, believe it or not, a mining company in Rwanda uh, called Power Resources International. This cell phone of mine has tantalum, which is literally the
Ah.
rarest stable earth mineral in the solar system. It's highly sought after, and it's being taken from Africa, and the value add is
Mm.
being made by Americans and Chinese and Canadians. And this company is the very first refinery in on the African continent, and it will basically be a game changer because it will bring Rwandese into the process of all that is required in the technology of cell phone and biomedical and other technical technology development. So we get to do those kinds of things. So that's the investment arm, and we love to hear
Mhm.
pitches from great businesses that are solving problems. On the other side is our consulting, our impact and sustainability consulting for businesses currently all in the US. And that has proven to be surprising, and for me now the most interesting, because I'm a pastor and a theologian. That's my background. I
Mm.
really have no business being in business, but that's where I found myself. And what I'm finding is that people are desperately hungry for reintegrated life. They might even
Mm.
be people of faith, but they don't know really how their faith interplays into their business life. Or they might be social justice minded, but don't always know how that relates to, well, what do you often see in the social justice space is people that become depleted. They're
Mm.
so pressured by injustice and the ravages of this capitalist system, and so angered by it that they deplete their life power,
Mm.
to be able to stay in the struggle. And so the integration of the self, the rediscovery of the self, as a divine being, as a we don't lean on any particular creedal or faith tradition, but you probably have to have faith that you're more than what you see.
Mm.
That there's an
Mm-hmm.
underneath of things, that there's a flow of energy and power that we can tap into. Give you an example that I've been using with my clients lately. I was recently at Detroit Airport, and I was on my way to another terminal, and someone was clearly late for their flight, and they're running towards
Mm.
me while I'm coming down the escalator. They're running to my down escalator, and this poor woman, not so desperate, she jumps on the down escalator,
Oh my
and
goodness.
and even when she realizes she's on the down escalator, she just bears down and just tries to work harder, but with all her might, she's not moving anywhere. And I thought that
Mm.
was such an analogy of, some people make it up, and then they write books about how I climbed how I climbed the up escalator. Really, there is a life force, there is an energy in this world that we can align ourselves with. And so a lot of our work is really on that spiritual mindset, the work that you do in culture change. Like,
Mm.
how can the first step to culture change is the change of the self, and
Mm-hmm.
anchoring the self within that which is irreducible, the irreducible self. Who are you really,
Mm.
and why did the universe bring you here? And can you go with that energy? And can you find where that energy leads you to the impact you were designed to make? A flower has an
Mm-hmm.
impact it was designed to make. It pollinates. Well,
Mm.
as Jesus said, are you not more important than the flowers? And, so what is yours to make? So
Yes.
a lot of the work that I do in impact and sustainability is to help business leaders feel the freedom and the value to rediscover themselves as a force for good,
Mm.
and then to align that um, with the desire for their business to make an impact.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about, and it has many different names, but I think what's been popping up the most is purpose.
Yeah.
And why do we exist? And as a business owner, you have kind of this multi-dimensional manifestation of that through your business,
Right.
because you have a platform that you've developed another entity that uh, is executing on your purpose. And to
Mm-hmm.
your point, I think it's really, really important for organizations and leaders, entrepreneurs, founders to understand what is that purpose, and to constantly reconnect with that. Because I do think we lose our way a lot of the times, right? We start a business for a reason, for a purpose, and you hire a big team and it does really well, and we kind of go back to the way the system was designed within this country, which is focusing on capitalism and shareholders and
Mm-hmm.
profits, and all those things are important. But how does one, so when you're doing this consulting, how do you discover, explore that shift
Mm-hmm.
with the business owner or the founder?
Right. Well, we have, I tried to think about how that has happened for me as a 55-year-old man who's been involved in the process of trying to make an impact. One
Mm-hmm.
thing I've realized, that there's a gap between the desire to make an impact and the capacity to make an impact. So I'm very interested in that nexus of knowledge that exists between the desire to do good and the capacity to actually do good. Even the charities that I've worked for or around, the best marketing wins, because the actual change that's sustainable at the local level is always less than what you hear being
Mm-hmm.
marketed. And what I'm really
Mm-hmm.
interested is what are those dynamics of transformation, and borrowing from integral theory. I only mention that I can cite where it comes from, but we really work on these three simple ideas of wake up, grow up, and show up.
Mm,
So the wake up
love
is
it.
wake up to yourself and the world. And the people with the most power, it's in their interest to stay asleep because
Mm,
if the structure and the system is benefiting you, why do you want to wake up to it? You might be held accountable for it. And
mm,
some people, even worse than wake up, they just build structures of justification. As a theologian, I actually know that one of the reasons we go to church is to get justified in who we are, as
mm,
opposed to what it should be as a path of liberation.
mm,
Instead of being a path of liberation, it's a structure of justification. So waking up is first waking up to yourself and then waking up to the world that you live in. Growing up is sort of technically about stages of growth and adult development. When you start out, it's all about me. And
mm,
then as you grow older, it becomes maybe, hopefully, about us. But that us can be very selfish. My family, my community, my gated community, my country.
mm,
Ultimately, full adult human development is we move from me to us to all of us, and even all of us and everything. So who are you within the political economy of where you live, and who are you within the life systems of which you are part um, in the biosphere? Can you really wake up to where you are and begin to grow up in your consciousness of your connectivity to others, and then ultimately, can you show up? Can you bring your power? And we
mm,
try not. People often like to, no, I don't want to talk about power. Well, wait a minute. You don't want to talk about power because you don't want to admit that when you walk in the room, people act differently because you've got the money. You better own the fact that you have power, because then you will be responsible for how you exercise power. Just because I'm a theologian, I have to do this. There's this amazing time in the Jewish tradition in which the Queen of Sheba, an African queen, hears about what's happened in Jerusalem under Solomon. And it's so amazing that people who were once slaves are now the
mm,
leader of a great nation. And so this African queen hears about it, and she makes this pilgrimage all the way to Jerusalem to meet Solomon. And she sees what he's done with this kingdom, and it's amazing. And so she says, I know why this has happened. Because of all people, you, a former slave, you will use this power to uphold justice and righteousness. And
mm,
justice is really finding out what belongs to whom and giving it back. And righteousness is just about right living with people and planet and environment. Unfortunately, in that case, right before that story, the text says, and here is a list of the forced labor Solomon used to build his house
uh,
and temple. And we American churches read right over that. But when a slave uses slavery for his economy, we're in trouble. It's kind of like when a nation of immigrants start talking about putting up a wall to keep out immigrants. When that kind
mm.
of thing starts happening, and the writing is on the wall, so to speak. And so the need to find justice and righteousness there is essential for the health of the economy and people and the planet.
Yeah, and it goes back to the regenerative part. I think what you're talking about is the opposite of regenerative. I don't know what the opposite of that is, but just destruction, compounded
Yeah, exactly.
destruction, maybe. But one of the things that and I don't know if you experience this in your work, but I work with a lot of leaders who come to me and say, I want to change culture within my organization. All the buzzwords, right? DE&I, innovation. I want to accomplish all of these things, but my people, they just can't get there. And you're kind of looking at them like, well, have you done the work? And, are you truly committed? And that's probably the biggest barrier to change
Mm.
within organizations and society. So, do you find that there is a lot of kind of performative or saviorism in this work? And how do we get past that? And can we get past that?
Yeah. One of my favorite scholars today is a man named Slavoj Žižek, a Slovenian Marxist, actually, and he has this phrase that has stuck with me that is, virtue begins in hypocrisy. In other
Mm,
words, we begin hearing the discussions about all of these things: sustainability, diversity, equity, inclusion, and they're often bandied about, and they're kind of virtue signals, and then people get cynical about them. But they're also, I think, the beginning of culture change. You
mhm,
what someone is being hypocritical about, someone else may start taking seriously, and then then somebody else starting to take it seriously, and someone beginning to build a case study, and then someone's actually seeing a thriving business, a business that's getting ahead, that's competing on its impact, that's kind of outloving the world, and so people are choosing that business, or investors are putting money into that business, and they're talking about this stuff. So what was once hypocrisy starts to become virtue. And I say, I just
mm,
don't, anytime someone starts talking about what is life giving, let's celebrate it and let's sort of encourage it. And, where do we see those signs of life? One of the great joys for me has been, here in the Midwest, working with often white, male, cisgender, middle age, the walking privilege. But
mm,
when you actually get to know a human being, you find that they care about the environment. One question that we ask is, what do you love most about the, your favorite place to recharge? It doesn't matter who you voted for or what your stance is. At the end of the day, you want to leave a better environment than you found. You want that. And so I
mm.
think finding the common pursuit of virtue within all of us and celebrating it and encouraging it, at least that's been my approach. And I find it gives me joy in seeing that culture change happening, even in places where you might at the beginning think that's the last group of people that are gonna care about this or that.
Hmm. Yeah, and you talk about this work as a differentiator. And
Mm,
so uh, I think that's a really important conversation because a lot of this can sound, um, to some people who are really focused on a capitalistic economy, like what's the bottom line,
yeah.
right? What are my
Mhm,
KPIs? What are the results? So tell us a little bit more about why this is actually turning into and has been a differentiator probably for a long time,
mhm,
and how businesses can rethink their scorecard on
mhm.
success.
Yeah, great. Well, I'll give you kind of the theory we're working on and then a specific example. We actually call
Mm-hmm.
what we do a balanced impact scorecard. So we
Oh,
look at
mm-hmm.
these, your noble purpose, and then under your noble purpose, the four P's. Being a preacher, it's good to have alliteration, but of course, profit, and we have to have you know, a healthy respect for profit
Mm-hmm.
and all of its many uses. That's the language that we use. A healthy respect for profit and all of its many uses. Business can't thrive without profit, but to understand it as a life force, as a not just a store of value, but as a source of energy for the other three P's: planet, place, and people. So we make profit, and if our household, our economic household, is well balanced, unlike our current economy where one room at the top has all the wiring and all the plumbing, and so all the energy goes to, it's going to fall over because it's not a
Mm.
well balanced house. But we can build our own micro economies and hopefully eventually a larger economy that is balanced around those four capitals of people, place, planet, and profit. So that's our balanced impact scorecard, and then we just sort of borrowing from the business world and the idea of a flywheel. But
Mm-hmm.
if you were to state, for example, that we would like to be a company that's net zero by 2030, let's just say if you stated that, whatever your company is, if you stated that internally, well, you'd be forced to look at the data. So you'd start digging around, and you'd get your team, and you'd be able to say, well, that's because some of our national clients are now recording that they only want to work with downstream partners that are net zero, or at least are mindful of their scope 3 outputs, for example. So we're going to do that. Well,
Mm.
making that statement, you begin to gather the data. Gathering the data starts to build your confidence, and you're starting to influence culture. And wow, you're starting to gain some confidence. You might even be able to go on a podcast and talk about how you did that. That might pick up some new client interest, but definitely young talent who are saying, hey, I have this degree, I have this interest, and I'm going to go somewhere where there's going to be an impact made. So,
Mhm.
attracting new talent, enriching culture, and then beginning to compete on impact, landing that national account because you can say, hey, we want to help you in your obligation to report on the impact you're making in the planet. We're a company, we're much smaller, but we want to participate with you in that. You're then gathering the data, you're gaining the confidence, you're attracting people, and then you're able to put
Mhm.
that energy into that virtuous cycle. That's your impact flywheel. Let me give a very specific example of a company that is a roofing company, and they had already created, roofing tear-offs are the number two landfill material in the United States. Tearing old
Wow.
roofs off and putting them in landfills is the number two material. So they designed a fluid applied roofing. You don't have to tear the roof off. You apply this fluid application solution. So that in itself is an environmental forward business solution. But they didn't know how to talk about it. So beginning to explore what that, well, it's white, so it reduces the temperature of the building, which lowers
Mm.
energy costs. Uh, and then they started to measure, well, if we don't tear off the roof, how much is that saving you? So they were able to package that story and go to a large national client and say, we know you have to report on your waste and energy use. If you choose us, we can help you lower and improve your scores and that you're disclosing in your impact and sustainability. So they went from just contemplating this, and these are not folks that are, granola crunchy green, hipsters. These are middle American people that are interested in building successful businesses, but they've begun to find that treating the
Mm.
earth well positions them um, in a the economy is beginning to reward those who treat people and planet well.
Mm.
That is a good fact that we can all celebrate, but it's a fact that businesses, the flip side of that is that you may be at risk because you can believe that there's some other young MBA or some other young person that's figuring out how to do what you do in a way that is more enriching for people and planet. So there's actually a
Mm.
negative risk for not being concerned about impact.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, which is for those who are not interested in changing or growing up, to your point, what is the risk? Do you think that there's going to be detrimental impacts to businesses like that? Well, do you think there's an audience for that? Will they thrive? What are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
Well, I think it behooves us all to step back and look at the major risk, which is um, the conditions in which human life thrive are
Hmm.
dependent on uh, the biosphere, life on planet Earth. And our current economy is continuing to. Currently, we are, there's always species going extinct. There always has been, and that's called the background extinction rate. But the current extinction rate is 1,000 to 10,000 times higher than the
Hmm.
standard background extinction rate. So our current way of organizing our life on planet Earth is killing life. So one risk is the lights go out. The
Mm.
rocks tell a story which could be our suicide note, how we
Mm.
failed to wake up, grow up, and show up. I think that's in our shared human interest to whatever your political, to depoliticize that and to recognize that as a common shared human interest. On the more pressing
Mm.
side, as I said, whatever, for example, in the built environment, 80% of the pressures on biodiversity loss come from land use and the built environment. So more and more and more, if you're a builder, if you're a roofer, if you're a painter, if you aren't finding ways to do what has to be done, we can't quit painting our. If we didn't preserve our assets, they would deteriorate, and we wouldn't be able to survive as humans. We
Mm.
have to coat our buildings. We have to preserve them. Someone will find out how to do that in a way that's life-giving for people and planet. So if you are
Mm.
not one of them, maybe you're at an age range that you can ride it out and it's not going to matter. But for your 40-year-old, 35-year-old new incoming, CFO or other talent, they're going to value that, and so there's a risk in
Hmm.
ignoring this shift in the economy.
Yeah, I really agree with you in every way there. I think that there is this tectonic shift that is happening, I think, in this world of the economy, of in the context of society, businesses having a platform and influence and responsibility to those things. So I absolutely love this conversation, Don. I think we could probably talk for 3 more hours
If I
on
can,
many
while
different,
we're still talking, I'd love
topics that
to
we
learn
mentioned
from
today,
you. And
but we've talked about a lot.
sorry, I think there's a little lag there, but I wanted to ask you one question, if I can.
Yes,
In
absolutely.
in the realm of culture change, it feels to me that there is you make a brand promise, but you also have an employer promise, so that
Hmm.
talent comes to you. And what, how do you see that your work in culture change relating to that employer promise to talent?
Yeah, so great question. I think another name for that is employee value proposition. It's probably a word that some are familiar with, which is what is the experience you're going to get as you're coming into this organization, into this partnership? What are some of the things we're promising, not just to the people within the organization, but as a brand? What is the impact we're looking to make? And, I think the perfect marriage of employees to employer is, we're working towards the same purpose, right? We
Mm,
have the same value system, and we're doing all of that in the context of community, which is your workforce that you've built.
mm,
So this is absolutely crucial. I was just recently working with a client, actually, because we work on, before we do any of our culture assessment work, we get the executive team together and we develop, if they don't have a purpose statement, the
mm.
kind of why do we exist, it's
Right,
the very first thing we do,
right.
because your value system has to align to that.
Mm,
How we're showing up within the organization, outside of the organization, needs to connect back to that. And to your point, that the storytelling behind that is just a very human way of communicating. Like, this
right.
is a part of the human condition. So it's crucial in culture and culture change work.
Awesome. Yeah. So it's that purpose that ultimately uh, infects the culture that people
Yes.
want to be part of. They want to go to work every day at a place that is contributing to that purpose, and so a business that's owning that purpose is beginning that talent attraction process. Awesome, awesome.
Yeah,
Well, I
and we try
appreciate
to
the
get.
chance to chat with you about these things. It's awesome.
Yeah, I absolutely loved our conversation, and would love for you to just to tell everybody where they can find you, if they're
Yeah.
interested in working with you or connecting.
Yeah, cool. Well, just come to our website at justcapitalquotient.com. There's a I have I speak to anybody that wants to sign up. Take 15 or 30 minutes to chat on
Mm-hmm.
Zoom, and I've really found that a very enriching process. So come to our website, justcapitalquotient.com. We also, for you listeners, the idea of moving from charity, I find a lot of business leaders, oh, if I get to a certain point, then I'll get involved in a charity. And I
Mm,
think in exactly the opposite way. I did that for 30 years. You're the one that are changing the world. You're the one that are giving people jobs on a horizon of career
mm-hmm,
and hope. You're the entrepreneurs figuring out how to build a new world. I think we need to think beyond charity. So I put together a little 15-minute little teaching piece on beyond charity. And so I'd like to make that
mm,
as a gift for folks. So come to justcapitalquotient.com/gift and see this little idea about how you don't need to think in terms of charity necessarily. You can go beyond charity into the very substance of your business to find the
mm.
real and sustainable impact. So love to share that, and you can also find there a connect with me button, and we could have a chat. So, and that also includes if you have a business. Again, we don't have all kinds of money to be throwing around, but we do like to hear pitches from businesses that are trying to solve some of these social and environmental challenges. So Angela, I'm glad to be in your network and be a part of what you're doing to help us build this new economy.
Thank you so much, Don. We will make sure to include all of those links in our show notes so folks
Awesome.
can listen, but also click. Don, thank you so much for
My
being on
pleasure.
the podcast.
Awesome.